Bird. We are so fortunate to have the marvelous Reverend Dr. Paul Hasselbeck with us today. He is going to be speaking to us about what's love got to do with it. So, Dr. Paul, with no further ado, come on board.
Okay, it's so good to be with you. Let me get my screen going here. Of course, I'm grateful to both Unity of Kitchener and Unity of Ottawa. Thank you for inviting me. And as always, I invite you to sit back. So tell me, which screen are you seeing? Are you seeing the screen just with the minion? Or are you seeing two screens? Just with the minion?
Well, a pink part says, thanks for inviting me.
Okay, great. Fantastic. So my website is paulhasselbeck.com. My podcast is metaphysicalromp2.com that I do with my friends, the Reverend Doctors Bill and Cher Holton. And then, of course, if you ever want to email me about anything, there it is. Maybe get your phone out, take a picture, alberthasselbeck@gmail.com. So then, what's love got to do with it? And how many of you think of that famous song? Oh my gosh. So what do we tell ourselves about love? And is what we tell ourselves about love true? Or are we going to question those unquestioned answers? So here's a few for you to think about. Love is all you need. We just read that or heard that. Love heals everything. Does it? Love conquers everything. Does it? Love makes the world go around. Does it? So let's see if I can address those this morning. So here's a little roadmap. We're going to talk about love, the power of love, one of the 12 powers. We're going to talk about love, the feeling and emotion, which is derived from the power of love. We're going to talk about love and expression. What are some of the ways we can express love? And some love quotes to ponder, then wrapping up with love and fear. So the 12 powers, I know most of you in this group know about them. They are so very important to the Unity teachings. But what are they? Well, we use them whether we're conscious of them or not. We are always using them. They do not care how they're used. They can be overdeveloped or underdeveloped. They can be used at any level of consciousness. And how do we use love in the arena of our consciousness, of our body, and beyond our bodies? We often don't think at that level of detail, but we can use love in our consciousness. We can use it in our bodies, and then, of course, beyond our bodies. And so I always like to start with this when I'm talking about the 12 powers. From the correspondence course, lesson 2, page 4, Charles Fillmore says, there is but one power. We use it as we will. And of course, that one power contains the 12 powers. So each of the 12 powers we use as we will. If we send it out by our thought and word and hate, it destroys. But if we send it out in love, it builds. There are not two powers, but two ways of using power. And I always start with this to remind people, because we carry over from our traditional background. Well, I'm not going to tell you all the religions I went through, but I was primarily a Presbyterian, where we think God uses us. But in many places in the writings, Myrtle and Charles talk about how we use God, how we use the powers. But they're not immune to slipping back into their former religious upbringing. And so when we talk about the power of love, fundamentally, love is our ability to desire, harmonize, unify, and attract oneself, to attract ourselves to, and have the affinity for something. I highlight desire because that is my primary understanding when I think of the power of desire. Now think about this. Think back or to a current relationship. Didn't it begin with desiring to know that person? Didn't it begin by desiring to be with that person? Didn't it begin with desiring to know more and more about that person? And that desire over time matures into this feeling we call love. And so when we talk about the power of love, the apostle is John. The location is the back of the heart. The color is pink. And it really works with all the powers, but primarily discernment, understanding, and will. Let me say a little more about that. So when we're choosing something, we're using our power of will. But when we're choosing something, we have to know, we have to understand all the choices we have. And we have to use our discernment, our evaluator, to choose between all the options. And when we choose, I usually like to think of to the left, I'm indirectly selecting all the things I don't want and choosing one thing I want. But what drives this process? What drives this choosing process? Well, I think it's the power of love as desire. So if you notice you desire dark chocolate right now, you begin to motivate yourself to get dark chocolate. And so from Healing Letters, Myrtle Fillmore says, God is love. We make divine love into loving. So we make divine love into this feeling, this emotion, this experience we call loving each other. And in Jesus Christ Heals, Charles Fillmore says, God is not loving. And of course, that brings up a lot of people's hackles. What? I've been told my whole life God is loving. But he says, God is not loving. God is love, from which is drawn forth all feeling, sympathy, emotion, and all that goes to make up the joys of existence. So Charles is saying we use this power of love to be loving. And again, in Jesus Christ Heals, he says, God does not love anybody or anything, but God is the love in everybody and everything. And I really like that distinction. And so we can talk about the feeling of love, but it really doesn't make the world go round. The power of love does make the world go round by desire. Have you ever noticed that from the moment you wake up to the moment you decide to go to bed, you are desiring something? And this is the way in which desire, this expression that we're using of the power of love, that makes the world go round. We're always desiring something, sometimes good things, sometimes bad things. People are desiring things that hurt other people. But still, underlying this desire is this principle, this power of love, that each of us decide how we're going to use it. Remember, Charles said, if we send it out in hate, it destroys. If we send it out in love, it brings together. So love, the feeling and emotion, is an intense feeling of deep affection. And I would say deep desire for the other. It's a great interest and pleasure in doing something, in that I love chocolate. I love bicycling. I love, fill in the thing you love to do. It is the feeling, Charles says this, it is the feeling that excites desire for the welfare of its object. And Charles said this in Keep It True Lent. But you know what? I think he got it backwards. This is what I wish he had written. It is desire that excites the feeling for the welfare of its objects. And I demonstrate this because sometimes we put Myrtle and Charles on such a pedestal We don't really think into or question what they've written. And the beautiful thing about unity is we don't expect you to check your brain cell, your intellect at the door. We invite you in. We want you to think into everything we're teaching. So when we're talking about love, the feeling, it gives rise to an action, or really what I like to say, an expression. And if you haven't heard of this book before, The 5 Love Languages by Jerry Chapman, it's a really good book, and it's helped me with plenty of relationships. So he says there are 5 ways we express love. 1, by touch. 2, by quality time. That's where you're investing time with another person, where it seems to the other person they're the only one in the moment. Words of affirmation. It's so important that we affirm each other, that we give each other credit. And so this is a really important way to express this feeling of love. Acts of service, doing things for one another. Another very important way we can express love. And finally, gifts, giving things to each other. So when you're going about your day, think about, how do I want to express this feeling of love, which I'm deriving from the power of love? And these are 5 ways to do it. Most of us focus on 1. Mine is quality time, followed by words of affirmation. And usually the way we express love is the primary way we can receive love from another. And so here's some quotes to ponder. You are the abode of love. You are filled and thrilled with the mighty magnetic forces that love uses in doing its work. Now notice, here's an example where Charles is making it sound like love is doing the work. The feeling of love in you is doing the work, or the power of love is doing the work. That's backwards. You're the doer. You're the one using these 12 powers, using this one power. The power doesn't use you. So I want to do this brief side trip into supply and spiritual substance because it relates to the power of love. So supply is spiritual substance. Usually when we come into unity, we think supply are the things we get, the relationships we get. But when we hear the word supply or read it in unity, it means spiritual substance. And you'll find Charles defining divine substance is our supply. But what is this substance? This substance is the divine idea of the underlying reality of all things. So wherever you see divine substance, supply, it's a divine idea or a combination of divine ideas. These divine ideas are the resources we use to do everything. And so how does this relate to the power of love? Well, here we go. Banish worry by quietly and confidently affirming the drawing power of divine love as the constantly active magnet that attracts your unfailing supply. And I would change this to this. Banish worry by quietly and confidently affirming the drawing power of desire as the constantly active magnet that attracts your unfailing supply. So see, when you desire something, you are pulling together, consciously or unconsciously, the very divine ideas that you're going to use to acquire that thing you desire. A good affirmation to rout worry is one like this: the divine love bountifully supplies and increases substance to meet my every need. Well, now you can read this differently, because when I read this at first, I thought this meant money. I thought this meant food. I thought this meant outer things, but it doesn't mean that at all. We use divine love to bountifully supply and increase our awareness of divine ideas. And I use those divine ideas to meet my every need. And so desire bountifully supplies and increases substance or divine ideas to meet my every need. And as a way to wrap this talk up on love, I'm pretty sure I've mentioned this to you before, but I think it's really important we question what we believe about fear versus love. And so fear is sometimes referred to as false evidence appearing real. It is also thought to be forget everything and run, which I really like, or face everything and rise up, rise above it. However, as I've been exploring love and fear in just the last maybe 5 years, I've realized something different for myself, and I hope it helps you. So we have two amygdala. We talk as if we have one, but almost every structure in the brain, there's one on each side, except for the pineal gland. So our two amygdala are always asking, am I safe? Do I matter? Am I safe? Do I matter? And if our amygdala hears or perceives, no, I'm not safe, no, I don't matter, that little structure causes our adrenals to release adrenaline and cortisol. And what happens inside us in reaction to that is fight, flight, freeze, or please. Looks like I missed the flight there, but that should be fight, flight, freeze, and appease. And so what's important for us to know is the antidote to this. So if we notice we're triggering ourselves, if we notice we're not feeling safe or we don't matter, the antidote is the calm and connect breathing. That's where we breathe in to a count of 4, hold it, and breathe out to a count of 8. If you do that, your body must release dose, D-O-S-E, and I'll define that in a minute. Another way is to hug yourself. Did you know when you hug yourself, you release these hormones to counteract these fight, flight, freeze, and please or appease responses? See, your body doesn't know when you're hugging yourself any differently than if someone's actually hugging you. And so that's a way to release a dose of what I call the happy hormones. What are those? Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphin. So if any time you're feeling you've triggered yourself in a fear response, you can modify your breathing so your inhales are less than your exhales, or you can hug yourself. And finally, if you're like me, I've been taught things that like fear is the opposite of love, or fear hides love's presence. But what if fear is actually evidence of love's presence? Friends, this concept has transformed the way I show up, because the moment I'm aware I am entering the fear, I ask myself the question, what am I loving in the moment? Because when we are in fear, of course, our amygdala are active, but when we're in fear, why are we afraid fundamentally? That something we love, like an object or a car or our home, is being threatened, or something we love, our beloved, our children, our friends are being threatened, or I can be fearful if I'm feeling threatened. So what I've noticed is that fear cannot be present unless there is love present. And so we can use fear as an affirmation that love is here. And what is it that I'm loving? And then that helps me tamp down the fear response, because it's what I'm loving that I want to focus on. So what's love got to do with it? Kind of, sort of everything, because the world goes round through our desiring things, desiring each other, desiring cars, desiring houses. And anytime we're fearful, something we desire is threatened. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Dr. Paul.
You're welcome.
So what I'll do is I'll just take a couple of minutes to invite everybody to meditate.
You.